reputation is spotless, his background, and I wish him a safe and successful career here in Kenilworth, carrying on his law enforcement career that he started with corrections and with East Orange. And I wish him the best, and for Kenilworth, he's going to do a great job.
Absolutely. Welcome.
Welcome.
All right, I'll do it. Mayor, Mike.
Okay, does anyone else have anything to add?
Mayor, I would ask at this point, because we did invite Mr.
We're still in
Mistretta,
public, oh, okay.
I would ask that Mr. Mistretta come up. Frankly, and I'll talk to the governing body members, an adverse vote tonight is disappointing and maybe reckless on the redevelopment plan, and I'm hoping that all in the community will listen carefully to what Mike has to say. Mike's an expert in this area, and Mayor, we'd asked him to come in. I would just ask that he briefly summarize where we go now that the redevelopment plan has been adopted. But it truly was disappointing.
Councilwoman. My name is Michael Mistretta. I'm a licensed professional planner. I work for Harbor Consultants. I'm your consulting affordable housing planner, and I represent the council. My responsibility for the council is to, assist, work with the governing body and address the compliance issues that we have with respect to, I'm trying to take this off, with respect to our affordable housing obligation. That's my responsibility to the borough. The redevelopment study that was in front of you this evening declared one piece of property as an area in need of redevelopment. And that was the very first stage of a redevelopment process that is intended to move that project forward so that the town can move forward with the next step, which is a redevelopment plan. The redevelopment plan is essentially a mini master plan, if you will, that will create a zoning and design standards for this property for an inclusionary housing project. What is that? That is a project that includes a mixture of market rate units, market rate family rental apartments, to be very clear, and a mixture of low, moderate, and very low income affordable units that are mixed within the project. I've been working on this project for this one particular property now for going on 4 years. It has culminated in a negotiation that has put this property in front of us now to, the next step is to adopt a redevelopment plan. Why is this so important? This is the first step in the process of putting together what's called a housing element fair share plan, which is essentially otherwise known as an affordable housing plan. It's a plan that your planner puts together, works with your planning board and your governing body, and it's designed to satisfy our borough's constitutional obligations. We as a borough have this constitutional obligation, right? That is the numbers that we have to address within our plan. To give you some high-level numbers, I'm not going to go too far into all these numbers. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. But long story short, Mount Laurel 4 came down from the Supreme Court in February 2015. It essentially said the COA process, Council on Affordable Housing in Trenton, was not doing its job, basically defunct. So they took the responsibility from COA, they moved it over to the local courts, and that's where we are right now. And the courts were assigned the responsibility of overseeing these plans. And this affordable housing plan that we have a responsibility to, a constitutional obligation to address, includes a series of numbers. And they're very complicated, but there have been a number of court decisions on it. The one that we need to rely on throughout the state is known as Judge Jacobson's numbers that came down in March of 2018. And it essentially said our borough was assigned a prior round obligation, a gap period obligation, and a prospective need obligation. What does that mean? Those are the time periods from when COA was first implemented to now. 1987 to 1999 is known as the prior round. Then you had this gap period, 1999 to 2015, where you must have, I'm sure a lot of you have read about the back and forth between the state legislature and the court and the government, and so round and around, and it's challenging the rules. It came out with a set of rules, they appealed. We went through this whole process where the rules were ultimately not adopted, and then they came down with the decision in 2015. That's called a gap year. That's a 16-year period. And then we have this new prospective period, which is known as the third round. It goes from 2015 to 2025. So we were assigned an obligation of 354 units. That's our obligation. I'm not here to argue that. That's the number that we've been assigned. My responsibility to you is to put together a plan that starts to address that number. That's my responsibility to you. Now, I have this very large number of 354. I have a developer ready, willing, and able to construct and has brought forward an inclusionary project that's going to have this mixture of market rate and affordable units on this one particular property. And that is the first cornerstone, if you will, of our plan.
Mike, let me direct you to, I think, the specific question, because the borough took action tonight.
Yep.
And I'd ask you to respond based on your professional experience. You need to know this governing body's been getting a number of letters back and forth regarding the experience of other towns in dealing with this issue. But can you explain to the governing body your opinion? If the governing body did not adopt a redevelopment plan, and we came very close tonight, if we had not done that, what is your opinion as to what the Union County courts would have done?
Sir, I just want to give a little bit of a flavor of a background on that, but in order putting together this plan leads to the question, tonight you have in front of you this resolution to support the area need of redevelopment designation. I strongly encourage and I strongly support that resolution. It is in the best interest of the borough to move forward with the redevelopment process on this property, because I just went through all these numbers and obligations, but this is the property that we have in front of us to start to address our need. If this did not move forward, if this does not move forward, I cannot speak for the developer. I represent the borough, but I would imagine we've been working under this quote-unquote good faith up until now. Fair negotiation back and forth between the developer and the borough to put together what we think is the best project for the borough while still addressing our needs. To answer the question, if we don't move forward with this, what would happen? Somebody else should answer that question rather than me, because the developer or one of his representatives, but I would imagine that our next step is, instead of having this presentation tonight in front of this council, we were going to have this conversation in a courtroom.
Well, let me make it simpler for you, Michael. If in fact a plan is not developed, would you briefly explain to this governing body how a court-appointed special master would affect this borough?
Exactly, and that's why I went through all this series of numbers.
All right, but that's what this governing body needs to understand.
As your representative, I have a responsibility to put this affordable housing plan together. And we are trying to do it through good faith negotiations with this one developer. That is not our only responsibility. I put those numbers out there for a reason. 354 is a large number. The number that we're talking about with this one particular development, we would capture 25 potential units. With bonus credits, we're still looking at a gap of 322. So we have to put together an affordable housing plan. If we don't do it on a voluntary basis, with all of us in this room, with the assistance of the planning board professionals, other people will do it for us. That's the special master that Mr. Capisa mentioned. That's a court-appointed professional planner who is assigned to our borough, who will look at our zoning, look at these numbers. He or she starts with those numbers, and that's why I keep going back to them, because that person will have these numbers, and I can't argue those. 354 is our obligation. It's a rather very large number. So the special master would come in, and they would start to tell us how to adjust this number, tell us how to rezone our town, tell us what the height density standards are going to be. And I could promise you, they're not going to be as careful and protective of your borough as I would be.
Mike, one other question on this, because this isn't a lecture, but would you please explain, based on your wide experience, how would you assess where Kenilworth stands right now, before this vote tonight, compared to the other 20 municipalities, well, not the other 20, the other affected municipalities in Union County?
I don't have, my office represents a number of municipalities in Union County. Off the top of my head, Berkeley Heights, Springfield, Scotch Plains, Kenilworth, and Garnwood, a number of others. We've all settled. We've all prepared our plans. We've gone in front of the court, we've had what's called a fairness hearing, then a compliance hearing. The plan has been reviewed by Fair Share Housing Center, by the court, by the special master, and they've been adopted. They're in place. I went through this time period for a reason, because the prospective need, the third round, what we're in the middle of right now, is 2000, it started in 2015, and it culminates in 2025. We're 6 years into the third round, and we don't have our plan yet.
Is there any other community that you would, based on your professional experience, assess as being in the same burdened position that Kenilworth is in right now?
I believe that right now the number is Fair Share Housing Center has settled with approximately 325 municipalities statewide right now. That might actually go up a little bit, because I know there's some recent settlements. I'm actually working on a couple of them. There's a few municipalities that are exempt. We're not one of them, so we're like the last group, if I could put it that way. I strongly encourage you to work together on this issue. I can't emphasize it anymore that we have this obligation. It is not going away. And the best advice that I can give you is that you maintain control of your municipality by voluntarily putting this plan together to meet this obligation, put the zoning in place through overlay zones, through a redevelopment like we talked about tonight. There's going to be a whole combination of different mechanisms that comprise this plan.
The other question I just wanted to ask you is, you've experienced other towns who have not followed this path and have litigated. And I know you've been involved as a witness in a number of these cases, and to her credit, I know the mayor, because she calls all the time about this, she studies what's going on in these other towns. But my question to you is, what is the cost to a municipality if they do not conform to the Mount Laurel responsibilities? And more importantly, when they don't respond, what ends up happening to them?
Well, first of all,
Like a deposition.
you're
I do, I feel like it's well, but this is not a laughing matter.
No, but
It's not a laughing matter.
It's a very...
no, it's not a laughing matter.
Let's,
Go ahead.
someone has the floor.
The bottom line is, we would be found to be non-compliant. There's a potential that this governing body, along with our planning board, would start to lose its zoning power, at least over this affordable housing plan. Other professionals would have a large influence or take over that responsibility. To answer the question regarding litigation, yes, I've been involved in municipalities that did challenge, did not adopt a plan, and went through the whole litigation process. Over a 3+ year period, the numbers in that particular municipality, the litigation fees for professionals exceeded $5 million, just to give you some flavor. Others were more around 1.5 to 2 million who have challenged. It all depends on how complicated it gets, but it quickly escalates. and you quickly lose control of your zoning. And that's the part that I want to emphasize. You're going to pay a heavy financial price, but you're also going to lose the ability, what is very crucial to us, is the power to zone and the power to dictate how we comply with these numbers. They're very large, it's very complicated. This, what you have in front of you tonight, is one resolution for one redevelopment area, one piece of property. It is, in my opinion, critical that that moves forward to the next stage now that it's declared an area in need of redevelopment, and that we work with this developer, we work with the planning board professionals, and put together this redevelopment plan in a good faith manner and a very quick time frame. That is not the only thing I'm going to come to and ask you about, because that's one property on one project on one property. We have a very large number. I'm going to need more. I'll get into that on another evening. But all of this will come together in affordable housing, what's called an affordable housing plan, that will ultimately be filed with the court.
Thank you. Well, I think I can say that the last thing I would like to see happen in Kenilworth is a court takeover. It's very irresponsible for our governing body to do something like that. And I agree with what Mr. Mistretta is saying. I have studied this. I have watched it in Cranford, Springfield, over and over.
Fort Lee.
These builders' remedy lawsuits and the town loses every single time. I can't name one town where they have won. And I think that we have to be responsible to our community and for the future of what's going to happen in this community. I'd like to point that out really clearly because I know what can happen, and I saw it, and I've been reading about it for 20 years. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Well, you said that we need to have 300 and some odd units to be compliant. This is only going to remedy half of that.
Not even.
How are we going to go forward with finding space to build?
Well, our town, it's a great question. Our number is 354, but we're what's called a developed municipality. We're a built-out municipality. We're what's called a land-poor municipality. So what you do then is you do what's called a vacant land adjustment. And you look at all the property in the town, and you look for opportunities where we could bring in overlay zoning or other mechanisms that would be put in place on top of our existing zoning to collect what's called an unmet need, which is we don't have the land, we have this big number that the court assigned to our town, but we're developed. We don't have all this vacant land like some of the more western municipalities. So it goes into a different category that's called unmet need. It's a lower or a lesser, I should have said, number that we have to address within our plan, although we still have to provide opportunities for it. For an example, some of my towns where I don't have enough land, we put in mixed-use overlay zoning in our downtown that allows for an incentive bonus for apartments on maybe the second and third floor above like a restaurant or commercial in our downtown or so forth, and we would slowly capture units along in that manner. Those are the type of mechanisms that we would have to put into the plan.
However, Mike, would you give your opinion to the governing body? How compassionate is a special master to unmet needs?
The biggest thing the biggest takeaway I would like you to take away from tonight is this is Mount Laurel, the Mount Laurel doctrine is supposed to be a voluntary process where municipalities are supposed to be doing this on their own and putting this plan together. Now remember, this started in this round is 2015. We're already 6 years into it. It's 2021, and I don't have a plan yet. I need a plan. And that's already, I'm already at a disadvantage. I've got one project, but I need to put together a plan quickly with the governing body, with the planning board professionals, and move this forward. Like I said, I think the number is up to 330 towns have already settled and filed all their plans. We're like one of the last groups out there. And Yeah, I haven't polled every town in Union County. I don't represent every one of them, but everybody's settled.
You don't foresee being that drastic that they'll force eminent domain and force property owners out to...
If there's a
build
court
on-
takeover, they could.
Now, eminent domain is a taking of property. They're not going to do that. The court's not going to use eminent domain. What the court will do is, the court will assign a special master who's a planner, just like me. But that planner doesn't represent Borough of Kenilworth. That planner represents the court. And that person will come here and I don't want to say they'll take over the process. They will have a heavy hand on this process that you're not going to like. Because right now, we're trying to do this in a voluntary manner, good faith efforts. Those are the two keystones throughout this document. We're supposed to be working together as a community and putting this plan together and meet our obligation. And they strongly encourage that you do it through a voluntary process. The court does not want to come here and tell you how to zone your community. But they will. And we need to act. We need to act quickly and professionally and show good faith and continue moving this process forward, particularly on this one piece of property. It's critical. It's in the best interest of the borough. Now that we've got the area need a redevelopment, the next step is we need to come together and put together a redevelopment plan for this property. That's critical. It has to move. Or else somebody else is going to do it for you. So, okay?
Thank you.
Mike.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else?